switch that in a minute. I'm going to rush off and top up my coffee and come back.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning with Talking Niagara with me, Peter Giblett, and him, Dave Wheeler. Hey, Dave. How are you?
How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad. Had a busy day yesterday. Sorry, I didn't add anything to the story bundle. But anyway, so but there's some interesting stories you gave us. Okay, so let's get on with the first one of them. Schools are looking to bring back police officers into the classroom, and I have to wonder. I wondered at the beginning whether this was a good move, the moving police officers away from the classroom. Oh, here you are. Because what was happening by moving police officers away from the classroom, I think you're kind of getting, you're giving the idea that there's something wrong with the police. You know, we used to. I'm not saying we have police officers in the school. That's something I'm still not comfortable with them being there all the time in the school. But I do think that we used to have kind of sessions about, road safety. Sessions about how to keep yourself safe, what to do, for your own personal safety, and other sessions about why you might call a police officer.
Yeah, this is entirely different. I remember we used to have Elmer the safety elephant and a large cop, usually the biggest one they could find, it seemed to me as a kid, completely in uniform.
Well, he'd had too many donuts. He couldn't. Yeah, he had too many donuts. He couldn't run after criminals anymore.
Huh. Well, we'd have the Elmer the safety elephant program. I thought was pretty good. So you'd have a big cop, and he'd call us boys and girls all the time. Now, boys and girls, that don't do this. Watch out for that. And he would. The cop would come in a couple times a year to remind us about road safety and the things you could do to make sure that you were very safe and the things you had to do to be very safe on the roads. Look both ways. Yeah, that kind of thing. And at that time, when there wasn't a whole lot of dedicated crossing areas, it was essential that the kids knew what they were supposed to do. And a kid was killed a stone's throw from my house when I was 7 years old. I remember it very vividly. I was in the backyard of my house. I heard the screech and crash and ran out, and there was a car had hit a bicycle, and the kid had been thrown, and he'd hit his head on the curb. And as a little kid, I was about 7 years old. I was able to crawl through the adults. We were all standing around waiting for the ambulance, and I looked at the kid face to face, and before any adults were. So I was like a few feet from him, and his eyes were rolling up in his head. And he had a brush cut and freckled face. His name was Jim Hughes. I remember that. And there was blood coming out of his ears and his nose, and so there was, and he was like 10. So that kid was killed by a car, so it's very, very important that we, that the police came and told us about safety. Now, this is a totally different thing they're talking about here, though. They're talking about an officer, a liaison officer, almost in a school. The program's called School Police Liaison Officer, SPLO program, and it has had mixed feelings and mixed results. So when a police officer comes in and starts to have a rapport with the students in the schools, and with growing violence in schools now, you can understand why some teachers in some schools welcome a police officer in the school. And for a wholly different reason that's from the States, where they have a lot of shootings. We haven't had so many school shootings up here, thank God. But it is the rising violence within the school, and a liaison officer trying to, in many cases, dissuade kids from becoming gang members and things of that kind.
Well, I think the point about it is.
I'll be right back. I gotta get my coffee.
Yeah, the point about this. Yeah, point about this, Dave, is that of course when you need police officers in the school to a certain degree to dissuade gang violence, but also the other thing about that is that you've got breaking up fights, I suppose, in the school corridor always used to be a thing that teachers, would get involved with, and back in the day they wouldn't be afraid to actually discipline kids, where they seem to be afraid to discipline kids today, and that's a problem that I think we face. And I don't know that in that regard, does the presence of police officers stop people from being stop kids from being nuisances in the class or in play periods or whatever?
I don't know. I think it's in that particular case, it's a little bit more important to have them in the high schools. Basically, the problem here is among indigenous schools. They have had indigenous communities have had a long storied sort of negative relationship with the police and the RCMP in their particular areas. And so when a police officer comes into their schools, they feel intimidated because this is the enemy. This is the ones that beat their uncle or did all kinds of different things. Remember, the police are different than they used to be. So to indigenous students, a police officer may be intimidating. I think you can get around that by just putting an indigenous officer in there.
Well, exactly. I think that's an important aspect. Put an indigenous officer in the schools, so that in those schools, particularly, so that kind of you kind of know for some people that might be Uncle Jake or something, It
may be, and the other thing is one of the criticisms of this is saying that they don't really establish relationships all the time, because in some areas you have one police officer going to several schools, so they don't have time to really build a relationship with the students in the schools. I think
certainly your guy that used to come around with the one that used to visit you, and this is the one that visited us, probably had a full-time job going around the schools in the area, and would see 5 or 6 classes in your school before going and seeing 5 or 6 classes in another school. So they'd probably be at schools 2 to 3 days a week.
Well, sure. It's like our Elmer, the safety elephant cop that would come to us. Now, we didn't expect him to be there all the time.
No.
But every school had an Elmer, the safety elephant there to remind you. Every once in a while, the teachers would remind you. And then once or twice a year, we had Officer so-and-so come along with Elmer, the safety elephant. And he would be kind of a soft-spoken but guy, but he would try to emphasize the safety of things. This is completely different. This is a liaison officer in the school trying to build connections between the police, the community, and the students.
I have to wonder whether not having police officers in the school has caused more entry into gangs by kids, more crime by young people. It's stopped the level of kind of what's decent in society.
I'm not so sure that will happen. As we recall, and it was a failed program. I don't even know if it still exists. But unlike the United States, where they were trying to integrate schools, to improve the quality of education for the minorities in the United States. In Toronto, there was actually an effort to separate Black kids out of the public schools. They felt that there was a kind of a culture developing where Black kids felt necessary to be the troublemakers and the ones that were sort of the rebels without a cause in the school, and it was not good for a Black kid to do well in school, because if he did, he was giving into the establishment, whereas Asian kids, having a different culture, they were expected to do well, and the white kids somewhere in between. What happened then was a lot of the Black kids got left behind because they adopted this kind of sort of culture that they
ended up,
yeah,
it kind of ended up in gangs because of it, I suspect.
Yeah, and because of the cultural sort of demands on them, certain Black leaders in the States have mentioned the same thing. They've become very, very frustrated when even Black kids from good neighborhoods feel the need to be sort of underachievers in school as a matter of public protest or just fulfilling a cultural need. This is a great frustration of many Black educators in the United States, where you find rejection of established education among that individual ethnic group.
Yeah. And the worst of that, of course, is that it is actually enhancing the bad, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the Black kids are supposed to be the bad dudes.
Yeah.
The Asian kids are supposed to be the smart kids, and they are the smart kids because the culture demands of them a performance in school, so they have strong family connections.
And so Indian kids, Chinese kids, and other kids in Asia, Koreans, they all demand, their parents all demand they pay attention in schools. They want straight A's, etc., etc.
Yeah, so the pressure is at home, and responsibility. They put a lot of responsibility on the kids from the very beginning. You're going to go to school, have fun, but the number one thing you have to do is be good at what you do and be good in school. But on the other hand, we find among the Black leaders a very great deal of frustration that the culture among the kids, Black kids, or is the opposite. They're supposed to be the mavericks and the ones that cut up in class or dodge class. They're supposed to be the anti-establishment type, where go ahead.
There's problems with that, because I think it starts to some extent at home, right? Because if you're at the parents, you're talking about Indians and Chinese particularly, parents of those communities typically make sure that their kids actually live up to a particular standard. They say, first thing you do when you get home, homework, right? Get your homework done. Get on, and before you can go out and play, you do your homework. Whereas
Karen Fraser, okay, go ahead.
Whereas other people from other backgrounds have different viewpoints on that. They don't tend to be as focused on study as Indians and Chinese and other Asians are.
Well, a lot of African too. You'll find Nigerians and Ghanese and stuff like that embracing education. But what Karen has just posted, we were taught when we were kids to have trust in the police.
Yes.
And we were taught to look for a cop before you get in trouble. And but to trust the police, that's no longer the case. Now you can build that trust back up in communities that don't feel threatened by police, but those communities that feel threatened by police, part of their culture, like the indigenous peoples, they feel threatened by police. They feel that the police are the enemies because the police have treated them harshly
But again,
throughout their history. That's why, you know, the trust and reconciliation quote was brought up by one of the people interviewed in this particular article.
yeah, but one of the questions about that is that we were taught to trust the police. One of the things, though, that my parents said to me is that okay, so yes, we should generally trust the police. They're there to stop crime, but if a police officer ever stops you and says, "I want to search your bag," know what your rights are, what your basic rights are. No, you can search my bag down the station. But you're not searching it here, type thing, you know?
Yeah. So anyway, like this is rather important, and I think probably in some cultures you might say the kids may go up to the cop and say, "Look, I'll give you $10 if you protect me from that bully over there." That's kind of their idea too. The cops aren't going to do anything unless they get an immediate award.
Yeah.
So it's cultural difference too. Now, with the rising amounts of violence in school, I think it probably depends on each different school and each different school board whether or not they feel a police liaison is important. Now, the whole idea of the liaison is a cop there to get to know the kids, established some kind of rapport. So when you do choose an officer for that liaison, he or she has got to be top-notch officer. Doesn't swear, incorruptible, and very steady, and
but also build a relationship with the kids as well.
Yeah, be able to talk to a kind of a person that's able to talk with other people. You get a lot of officers or some they don't have the interpersonal skills they might need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
the last thing you want
you get the idea that the cop doesn't know what to do until a kid starts running down the hall and the cop will pull him over and give him a ticket.
Yeah, and that's the kind of last cop you actually want. You don't want the guy who's sitting in the chair in the corridor with his arms folded, looking at
being
the world
bored.
By, you know. He needs to be part of the school. You know?
Which makes me wonder what kind of liaison training that they actually do have.
And that's an area that I don't have any knowledge about. You know, I really don't. You know,
no, it doesn't mention it here either. It doesn't mention it here. What does Mike say?
Mike says last year there were many weapons calls to the police at the high schools. People are getting something online, not realizing life is different.
Yeah, well, definitely. If you see look, I about a week or so ago, I walked into a store. And there was a couple there, and the guy was wearing a knife, a long knife on the side of his belt in a holder. And I'm thinking to myself, is that what we've come to? That people think they have to carry a knife around for their own protection?
I don't think
then you might find knives coming into the school. I remember a kid in my school in grade 8, he brought in a switchblade, and we were all fascinated by the thing. It was a long, he flicked the switch and there was a long blade coming. Where did you get that? And of course, we all wanted one.
Yeah.
I don't know what we think we would do with it, but we all wanted one. You know, it was a pearl handled switchblade. Wow.
Yeah. I can't remember anything quite like that in our school, but I do remember when I was a kid, there was a stabbing one place one time. Not in our school, in another school across the city somewhere, and that had the police in a right furore.
Yes, well, that Yeah, so that
And,
I don't
it
know.
turned out that it was basically, it was a bullying situation.
We also have the situation where teachers do not have the power of discipline as they used to.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, if I was kind of misbehaving a bit, the teacher would just take a yardstick and give me a whack with it. Another teacher was fond of taking a heavy book and crashing it over my head
Well,
with a big
we had,
wallop.
we had a teacher that used to be an expert with flying chalkboards, chalk erasers across the room.
Yeah, that was another one we came with. That any teacher at any time would take an eraser and fire it at you.
Yeah, this kid was actually, this kid was really being a nuisance. He was sitting at the back, and the teacher he's sitting in a nuisance zone, looking the other way, and the teacher fired off this board eraser, and it hit him smack in the side of the face as he was turned around talking to his friend. Disturbing. And that's a kind of break point where our teacher took control of this classroom, and he basically, Friday morning, it was an impromptu test. So and what he did is Monday morning he locked the door until everybody was there, and when everybody was there, he opened the door and he said, "Now you're going to sit where I tell you to sit."
Oh, okay. To spread
So
everybody out. They couldn't cheat and so on.
Yeah, the people who performed worst in the test went to the front of the classroom. The people who performed best in the test went to the back of the classroom. Well, I was sat at the front of the classroom because I liked, being able to hear everything that was going on, be able to see everything that was going on in the classroom. I hated being at the back, but because I performed best in the test, I was on the back of his class.
Well, yeah. So those are the things you can't do now because it hurts kids' feelings, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So even if you don't have corporal punishment in schools anymore to be able to control the kids, then like straps and things like that. Then what do? You have your words and actions. If you do use your words and actions to reprimand a kid, then that kid can just say, my feelings were hurt, and et cetera, et cetera. So the teachers are really, really stuck. They cannot, they have less and less tools to discipline a child. So if in that particular case, when the teacher themselves has less tools to discipline a kid verbally or corporal punishment, and et cetera, then those kids become emboldened because there's nothing the teacher can do. In those particular cases, you might want a police officer or some sort of liaison officer in the school, because once you embolden kids that they can do anything they darn well please, then things may get out of hand.
Yeah, if I was a kid, if a teacher told a kid off, and told my kid off, and then my kid came home and said, the teacher said bloody blah, I can't do this, and I say, yeah, the teacher runs the classroom, you pay attention to them.
Well, yeah. Well, my biggest fear was if I got in trouble at school, my father would find out.
Yeah, exactly.
That kept a lot of them. But you have families now collapsing. I talked to a very well-to-do person recently, and that person had regrets how they raised their children, because they gave the children everything they wanted. And now he finds he has 2 children in their early 20s that are not motivated to do anything because they've had everything handed to them. And then that person then goes to school, and doesn't necessarily have to perform or do anything because things are handed to them. Life is easy, that kind of thing. So it's a cultural difference here we have. But a liaison officer in school, I don't know if it has to be a police officer though. Does it have to be a police officer? It's police officer is a part of the establishment Could you have a retired firefighter or somebody like that come in and also maybe be
Okay,
a
fair question.
liaison officer?
Fair question. Don't have a thought about that. Or it could be, or yeah, exactly.
Could it
Fair
be a
question.
couple of retired cops or retired? You know what I mean?
Yep.
That they could then give more time to it. But these are paid positions, of course. And like I said before, the article here has rather a whole lot of mixed messages. Some are have had the police officer cancel the program and then started it up again. Others feel that it isn't working. Some do think it is working. So I would think there needs to be some sort of coalescing of ideas and trying to figure out what is the best way to do this.
Yeah.
Can we have a police officer that reduces the violence in school? Can we have a police officer that makes liaisons with kids and tries to direct them away from criminal activity?
Yeah.
I think the question is much bigger than the answer right now.
Yeah, and I don't have answers for don't have answers or opinions on a lot of it. So yeah, and I think there's a lot of we need to be asking more questions. And one of the biggest problems that we have in society, it seems to me, that we get a lot of youth crime, too much youth crime.
Well, yeah, because of the consequences aren't there.
Yeah,
and
exactly. And it used to be, for example, I think a lot of kids in my school used to be fearful that they might actually be suspended from school for 10 days.
Oh yeah.
I
would have really got it if I was suspended.
Yeah.
So that let's put it this way. Our society is in flux right now. We did have this idea that you could trust the law, and for the most part, you could, because your neighbor down the street's dad was a cop, and your other neighbor way down the other side was a firefighter. So you had these establishment people in the neighborhood, and you were able to get to know them, and a cop was an establishment guy, and you could approach a cop if you had a problem.
Yeah.
And those kind of things. Do we have that kind of trust anymore?
There's also the thing that, that if you got caught doing something in your neighborhood, doing something, petty crime, or, maybe not even a crime, but something that was naughty and, that most people didn't do. I think when I was a kid, you'd have the police officer would march the kid back to his parents and would be giving the parents a lecture, and of course then the kid's parents would be spending all night sharp tongue at the kid, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, that's the but that's the way it was. What's the way it is?
Yeah.
And I think a general uncertainty about where everybody belongs in society and all that has anything, but I think we flogged this one to death. What's next?
All right, moving on. Go is upping the number of services to Niagara Falls at the weekends to 8 trips on Saturdays and Sundays now.
Well, this is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It is.
Years ago, I thought that if I had money, I would have invested a lot of houses, because I thought back then, once that GO train starts getting going more, we're going to have more and more people from the GTA move down here. Well, that kind of happened, not just because the GO thing, but because a lot of people were able to sell their homes for massive amounts of money and then come down here. And in an age where a lot of people then began to work from home, et cetera, that changed things too.
This is weekend travel, so tourism travel.
No, weekday as well. It's weekday travel is going to go up. There's going to be more trains during the weekday.
Okay. Okay. Well, You see, the weekend one comes with double-edged sword. I hadn't read that bit. Weekend one comes with a double-edged sword because those that are involved in the tourism industry, those that bed and breakfasts and the hotels, don't like particularly the trains returning at midnight plus. They don't like those because all of a sudden now you don't get the overnight stays.
All right. Right now it says, this is what the article says from the review. It says currently there is a total of 6 trips, 3 in each direction, 3 from Toronto and 3 from Niagara. Every day, every weekday, Union Station to Niagara Falls go, Metrolinx. With 2 new trips to and fro Niagara on weekdays beginning November 1st, we'll be offering 8 trips every Saturday and Sunday between Union and Niagara.
That's confusing language.
There'll be two to and fro from Niagara on weekends. Oh, you're right about that. Weekends. I thought it was weekdays.
Yeah, no.
Weekday service levels to and from Niagara will remain the same. Oh, you're right. You were right about that. Yeah, I got that wrong.
Yeah.
So what's the point of that? I think you need I suppose, it's nice to have the weekend travel. 8. Yeah, definitely. It would be much easier to just jump on the train, go to Toronto for the day, and then come back later. You could even I don't know if they stop in Hamilton or how many stops they have. I read the article.
They do have stops in Hamilton. Basically, they if you get on the one train, it's a no stop to Appleby. Then it stops all the normal stops in through Burlington and etc. Not Appleby, sorry, Andover. Right.
Well, this would boost the tourism coming into town. We often talked about the rubber tire crowd. Those people that come for the weekend or even a day that can drive there. Well, here, if you have train connections like this, there you go. You can have a lot more people coming down.
Yeah, it increases the traffic during the day, but it unfortunately has a double-edged sword because it also means that the bed and breakfast owners and the hotels lose people overnight.
Yeah, there's always the idea too. It mentions in the article, the more cars you get off the road, the better. It's better for the environment, but it's also better for your mental health. There's just getting into traffic jams and stuff coming down the QEW. We've all experienced that coming and going. When you get on a train, you don't have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
If you get on a bus, you do, but not a train.
Yeah. So basically, it's expressed from there's several trains. Some are express and some are not. But there is one train that goes express from Niagara to the edges of Hamilton, and then I think it's Andover. That station is called, but I could be wrong.
There's also Burlington to.
Then it goes Burlington, Appleby. It stops all the way once you get to Burlington.
Yeah. So we, I don't know. It's a good thing overall. I think anything that brings more tourists into town. It is an indication that we're still very much a tourist town, but still it is what feeds us. So the more tourists come, the better. The more you extend the tourist season, the better. The easier you make it for tourists to come into town, the better.
Yeah.
All right. Hogtown, the GTA is like 4 million people. You want to have an easy access to them. Them going to parking at a train station and then coming down to Niagara is a lot easier than.
I have to ask you this: whether it's possible to do this. For example, Jays are in the in the playoffs at the moment. Is it possible to catch a train to go watch the Jays and then come back again?
Easily.
Right. Well, is the timing of the train permitted?
Well, yeah, you'd have to sort that out. You'd have to find out. It all depends on when they schedule the games. Right now, despite the fact that New York Yankees are in it with the Jays, the broadcasters have not given primetime slots to the Yankee Blue Jays games because Blue Jays are of very little interest south of the border, and they make
kind of
less
crazy
money.
because it's kind of crazy. It really is crazy because, in fact, for whichever side you sit on that fence, it's make or break, right? Jays are 2-0 up on the series at the moment. Basically, Yankees have to win all three to get through.
Well, the thing here is that when a Canadian when the Jays or other smaller market teams, although the Jays is a pretty good market team, but
that actually is a complete and utter nonsense by the American press. That you don't concentrate on those games. I think that baseball should celebrate when a small market team wins the series.
That's not the point I'm trying to make. Is the broadcasters. The broadcasters make the biggest money when big name teams are in it. So if it was when the Red Sox and the Yankees were having their wild card thing, it probably brought in more revenue than the two games that the Jays have just done south of the border. And it's the fact that actually the Yankees themselves bring in a lot of money. They have a huge amount of fan base across the state because of their reputation.
Yeah. 26 times winners of the World Series. You don't get that reputation for nothing.
Well, they're the biggest market to get the biggest money, and they don't have caps like they do in other sports.
They used to.
But if you have two big name teams, you're going to make a lot of money. If you start getting one of the smaller teams or the Toronto Blue Jays in the mix, the revenue is going to be less, and that is the source of the conspiracies, the umpire conspiracies, basically. That all of a sudden a lot of bad calls will come from the team that has the least market resources for broadcasting.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. I'm sorry, but let's get away. There's value in small market teams, whether in Toronto isn't that small a market.
No, it's not. It's talking about the market overall, the big broadcasters, and the 92-93 when the Jays won the World Series 2 years in a row back in the early 90s. I remember reading how much how it was one of the least viewed overall World Series of all time because it was a Canadian team.
Yeah.
So you got the local when they played the Phillies, let's say for the last World Series, and Joe Carter hit that magnificent home run.
Well,
to win it. So you would get a lot of interest in Philadelphia and in Toronto, but for the rest of the country, it was not. There was no interest in it. But once Yankees, say it's Yankees and LA or something like that, a big market, these big famous teams, then they would have a huge amount of interest.
But again,
that's money.
It's a whole difference. And again, it's like you just got to live with that. It's like there are always people who will only support their team. Red Sox Nation go to sleep once Red Sox are out. Dodgers fans, go to sleep when they're out. And the thing is, the TV stations pray for a Yankees Dodgers game or a Red Sox Dodgers game. Because that's where the big money is. But again, when a team like Seattle is, in the series, they're not seen as the same power as, say, the Dodgers.
That's my whole point.
Yeah,
it's about money.
And it's wrong.
And of course, the undercurrent suspicions have always been that the league will manipulate what it can to make sure that the revenues are.
I don't believe the league does, but
I don't think so either. But you know,
with NHL, I'm less certain.
oh, the NHL, they're not worried about market share in the NHL, at least not in Canada, because if once your team loses, mine Toronto loses, and I expect them to do that because they always do, right?
Yes, again.
So then thereafter, you just keep watching hockey to see who's the best. You still have an interest in hockey. However, other in other cities, I don't know. Maybe once the New York Rangers are out of it, maybe New York Ranger fans don't watch the hockey games thereafter. Who knows?
Don't know.
But anyway, what else we got? We kind of flagging
Right.
that one up.
Moving on. Carney's meeting Trump today.
Yeah. So I would say avoid great expectations. Everybody's sort of zeroing in on Carney. Come back home with something. And don't you know that Trump knows that too? So Trump knows that it depends on what mood he's in. So everybody says, well, Carney's going down there to the United States to meet with Trump, and he's expected to come back with something. Well, Trump knows that. So if he wants to belittle Carney, he won't give him a dime. If you want, right now he's in the perfect place for manipulation. I would suggest to the United States that they need some friends. They need some friends close by to play the big bully and dominate and tell everybody we're the boss man, and you do what I say is not really that good for the United States, particularly on this borders. And Trump still has this foolish idea of a 51st state. Meanwhile, he's not saying that about Mexico, is he? Because if he says there's a 51st, if the Mexico would be the 52nd state, he'd never go for that because there'd be a lot of people coming into the United States from Mexico.
He'd suddenly move the border. He'd move the American border south several hundred kilometers, and and then it would make Guatemala would be the enemy, right?
So, what are the expectations Carney can expect?
Yeah,
right now it's a game of attrition. Well, now he lost the game of attrition with China when he threw on the 145% tariffs and tried to back China into a corner and thought that he could outdo the waiting game with China. China just sunk its heels in and say, well, we're going to go right to the end with this. So you play your game and we'll see who wins in the end with the huge tariffs. Trump quickly backpedaled on that. But then he still has this power over us.
Yeah. And the car sector's preparing for the worst right now, but they've been preparing for the worst for months. And yet, in fact, actually, probably the Kuzma agreement has probably was founded upon the car industry. So I would think that the car industry would be fairly safe. But again, they're preparing for the worst. And the BMO also sees the long-term economic issues as not being favorable to Canada.
Well, right now, yeah, the BMO article I posted was a separate one, but it is related here.
Yeah.
Now we have these. I don't know why we have expectations for Carney. When I read this and I see a lot of political pundits or other reporters and that say, Carney's got to come back with something or it's going to be really bad. Polyev says you got to come back with something. Although in a separate letter, Polyev has expressed an effort to help Carney in the best way he can for the nation. So that's a positive thing. But on the other hand, he's going to be criticizing Carney if he doesn't come back with something. Is it realistic to come back with something when you're dealing with somebody who's always looking to exploit your weaknesses?
Yeah.
And to bully you. Now, this is different from in the past. When you had negotiations in the past, you said to your negotiating partner, what is a win-win situation? what's good for you and what's good for us.
Yeah.
And we work that out. I want to prove my position and you want to prove your position. So what's a win-win, right? Yeah. Drop your dairy or this or that, and we can make a deal. Now, right now, Trump is using sectorial tariffs on aluminum, softwood lumber, and all those such things. And by and large, he's left the Kuzma thing alone, except for those things. We find, too, that the United States has filled up as much as it can with Canadian goods before the tariffs came in. So they still have an ample amount of Canadian lumber to be used. So right now, even though at the very beginning, the U.S. housing has not been put under as much strain as it would have been if they didn't front load a lot of Canadian lumber. And so the stresses on the American economy is not as much
that front loading only lasts so long.
Yes, but in the meantime, while the economy is still working well with the amount of front loaded goods that have come in from Canada and elsewhere too, it's going to be up to Carney to tell Trump, look, once those supplies have been dwindled, then your car companies are looking at huge amounts of cost with aluminum, copper, and steel. It will be a negative effect for you more than a positive. You cannot quietly, on the sly, the huge nickel tariff has come down quite a bit because the United States realized it needed it. It didn't announce anything, but it just quietly reduced the tariff on nickel because somebody, knocked on the Oval Office and said, look, you know what? We're the military. We need that nickel there that's coming out of Ontario. And you putting a 50% tariff on it, it's not good for us. So that kind of went down. Also, certain tariffs on copper were reduced too because somebody said, look, we're going to need copper. Canada produces some of what we need. It's not a good idea to tariff it that bad. But meanwhile, he's holding the fort on steel and aluminum. Sooner or later, he's going to have to back off on the aluminum one because it will take 6 or 7 years for them to build up smelters to compete with Canada if they have enough electrical power to do that. And that is questionable. So you might have to back off on the aluminum thing. But in the meantime, they front loaded enough. So he's still sitting in the most powerful position. I think these things will be ongoing until the real strain of the tariffs comes to bear on the U.S. market. And that'll happen probably early next year in 2026. And when the looming midterm elections start coming up and the economy doesn't look so well, he's going to try to improve it the best he can. And that will mean lifting tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, that kind of thing. Because you can't build a steel mill overnight and you can't build a aluminum smelter overnight to take up the slack.
I don't know about the whole power game with the aluminium smelters, but because I don't know enough about it. But surely that's not impossible for the US. But as you say, that's it takes years to build something like that.
Yeah, particularly when on the other side of his mouth, Trump is talking about exploiting AI. AI takes an enormous amount of electrical power. So what do you want to do? Supply the electrical power for aluminum smelters, or do you want to supply the power for AI? AI will get the thumbs up because it could mean the difference between being the dominant power of the world or not, because China is running ahead with AI right now. So they have to keep pace and even stay ahead of China with AI. That means you need enormous amounts of electrical power. So where are you going to distribute that electrical power to? You will probably, down your list will be aluminum smelters.
Mm. Yeah.
And with Canada having, particularly in Quebec, having an enormous amount of electrical power and more coming because of the deal that Quebec and Newfoundland Newfoundland and Labrador have made about building new reservoirs and electrical charging, electrical producing generators in Newfoundland that will pass through Quebec and go into the United States. That's enormous amounts of money for them. But in the meantime, though, that electrical power here can be diverted to Canadian use. So there's many things that Trump has to look for in the future, whether or not. But he's playing the short game for now, and as he's playing the short game, he's got the most leverage. So what will Carney come out of this with? I don't think too much. But he's going to have to be deferential to Trump. He can't make him angry. He also has to come off as he's not being obsequious and bowing and all that. He still has to hold his dignity.
Well, and he can't acquiesce to the 51st state rubbish.
Yeah, of course that's stupid, but I can see why Trump would want it. There is a lot of there is some speculation that Trump and the Project 2025 wants to release themselves of being a world and global power and to isolate themselves in North America, have sort of the Monroe Doctrine, sort of dispel with the responsibilities outside of North America, and probably you would think northern South America, and have sort of this fortress of economy, which means they would have to have control over at least Canada and Greenland. And that is the speculation. And we see they've made the move on Greenland recently. They have agents in there trying to stir up trouble and trying to get the people there to vote for joining the United States. They're not too interested in that as long as they can control Mexico. They're not going to want to make them a part of the United States. But Canada seems to be something that would make them a very, very powerful island in the world to actually control Canada. So we don't, in the Project 2025 universe and the ideology that is MAGA, that overlaps with other ultra-conservative ideas of changing the fabric of the United States, we don't know the ideology of what's coming up. So I don't know. I think we're not going to make any real inroads in a deal with the United States until they start feeling the pinch of the tariffs.
And you see, to me, increased isolationism, fear of European powers, for example, or other powers in the modern world, is not a good thing. And I don't know that the Monroe Doctrine is going to get the world is going to get North America anywhere.
Well, it's anyway, it's a reversal to ages past, where the United States staked out a zone and told Europe in those days, now China, stay out of this zone. Now they're thinking of giving up on Taiwan and all that other stuff and leaving that all. I'm not so sure. They're following a much more isolation type of philosophy that they had before the Second World War.
I've never been a fan of isolationism anyway. I'm personally, I believe that we're much better off dealing with the rest of the world and working with the rest of the world.
I don't think it's possible to be isolationist anymore, to tell you the truth. I think it's retrograde. But that is part of the factors that Carney's going to have to deal with.
Of course.
In the meantime, I think if Carney is supposed to be an astute bargainer, but he's got a sort of the man baby working. He's working with the man baby, changes his mind every 2 seconds and threatens people and thumps his chest, et cetera, et cetera. In order to get some reasonable deals with him, I don't think there's any great expectation, first of all, but he still has to walk on ice. We see what Britain did. When they wanted a trade deal, they lavished state visits and pageantry and all that stuff that Trump loves. We don't have that, so I don't know how we can sort of manipulate the man baby. Putin manipulates the man baby by complimenting him, telling him how great he is. Netanyahu does the same thing. He has has the abilities to manipulate the man baby too, but I don't think we have that ability. So we're going to have to be very careful how we move.
I'm not expecting anything great to come out of today. I do expect maybe there might well be some announcements on 1 or 2 trade deals, but that's about all I'm going to expect.
Yeah, there might be some softening here or there. We don't know. Trump hasn't had a whole lot of success bullying other nations right now as far as trade and stuff. So he might feel the need to thump his chest and declare this tariff or that tariff. He did it on trucks recently, very quickly. I mean, the tariffs he had against Brazil just don't make any sense at all. And his idea of handing $20 billion to Argentina to help them out backfired, because then Argentina was able to sell their soybeans to China, which means the farmers in the United States have no market at all, and silos upon silos filled with soybeans. I don't know. For the meantime, though, we just have to walk as if we're walking on eggshells, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the
now the PMO article, if you wanted to, like, that was part of the whole thing. The Bank of Montreal, of course, is saying in no scenario at all, the best possible or the worst possible scenario, we're not going to do that well.
Yeah.
So the best scenario that Carney could get, whatever trade deal, will shrink our GDP and will affect our economy for years to come. There's a few things that the article says that is offsetting that, and that's our engagement with other world markets. But of course, that takes time to develop. But that has offset the negative effects a little bit, according to the article. And of course, the interprovincial trade.
Again, he's talking about shaving off 15, in the worst case, 15% against our longer term economic growth. In the best case, that long-term economic growth slows by 2.5%, and neither scenario is a win for Canada.
Well, one of the options was 35%, so that was 35-15 and
the 35, but none of the options are good for us. And in reality, even a 2.5% cut in economic growth means that we're back into negatives again.
Yeah, it's definitely the market situation are looking for short-term gains quickly, victories like that. There's nothing here about long-term viability over the long term.
Yeah,
with establishing strong win-win trade negotiations with Canada, then you would have this what Ford says is like the Can-Am fortress. What Trump wants to do is just kind of take over things and be the American fortress. But what Ford is talking about, and I think Carney too, you could really do have this Can-Am fortress where you can have this mutual trade agreement that strengthens both countries, and which makes both countries less reliant on outside countries like rare earths and stuff. You start developing the rare earth minerals in Canada, then you don't have to worry about getting them elsewhere. I think that the long-term strategy of the Trump administration is very short and myopic, and that will backfire on them in the long term. They're like they're stock traders looking for a big payoff today, but not thinking of what kind of payoff's going to come tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plus, you need a friend. You need a friend, and I think that you should point that out. You don't want to make enemies of Canada. It's your whole northern frontier up here.
Well,
what you want to do is have a very, very strong connection with Canada. We
Yeah.
already do militarily, and to do that economically,
And to talk Golden Dome for one moment, the other thing that he wants us to invest in, be the 51st state or invest or put a lot of money into the Golden Dome. It doesn't make any sense, because I was looking at this the other day and thinking to myself, well, for a large extent, when they've talked about Russian missiles coming across, they're normally coming across the North Pole. And you couldn't tell until it was too close as to whether a missile's aimed at Toronto, Buffalo, Washington, or Miami, because they could be heading in the same path all across Toronto to head to Miami.
Well, they head to Miami. You might want to let it happen there. It might do a few improvements.
Yeah, but put that aside, you know what I mean? You can't actually you couldn't tell until it was about to go down, about to drop, as to which city it's targeted at, because there are multiple cities on a straight line.
I think the speed at which they go, you can pretty well figure it out pretty quick. And we're talking technology that we have no clue about, so I think it kind of ended there. We could speculate where the missiles are going to go with this big Golden Dome. I don't think the Golden Dome will really come into fruition. Really, it may.
I think it's like Star Wars. It never happened.
Well, it's one of those things you can sign on to in the Trump administration, and if it goes ahead, we pay for it because we're part of the same.
Yeah.
Same defense network, but if it doesn't, we don't have to. So in the meantime, we'll have to commit to it. I'm sure we do. We'll have to commit to it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right, and I think we can leave it there.
Yes, without further ado, and I have to mention Gaza, as I always do every day. Trump says no more bombing. So what does Netanyahu do? He flips his middle finger to Trump and bombs all he wants. So the day Trump insisted that no more bombing after he started communications or Hamas communicated back, Trump says, well, no more bombing. What does Israel do? Bomb way more and as much as they want.
Yeah.
So who is really in control there?
Yeah.
More and more people are bringing up AIPAC and the control. Tucker Carlson claimed that during the Iran 12-day war, they had Israeli military people demanding this and that in the Pentagon, pushing the American military. Netanyahu's got to go. He's a war criminal. Ben Gvir has pointed out that they want to kill everybody and expel the Palestinians, and he is the finance minister. And Netanyahu tells us, well, don't pay too much attention to him. Well, get out of here. Obviously, the reason why you have him in your government is because I don't know, the Likud party itself. So
yeah,
Netanyahu, this whole particular deal has got Arabs on its side, the Arab countries on its side, because they don't know what else to do, I think. Yeah. They're afraid of tariffs, and they're afraid themselves of being bombed. So apparently there's going to be in Cairo just the Arabs and Hamas trying to make a deal. And every day that goes on, more hostages are going to die or come close to dying. So I think that, I don't know, is the peace deal reasonable? I don't know. It really is favoring Israel in every respect. But these are war crimes. Netanyahu has to be jailed. And if the United States doesn't watch it, they're going to start getting
You,
work.
you know as well as I do that Netanyahu will not see a day inside a jail cell.
No, he won't. But the best thing we can do is make sure, hope that the Israeli people will vote against them. The problem is the press is being restricted and censored. So the Israeli people don't know the extent of the damage that the IDF is doing inside. They get whispers from their own soldiers coming back who are distraught by the scenes of which they have participated in. So they get whispers there. They can see their economy crumbling, but they can't see what they're doing in Gaza. No external journalist. If I was Hamas, the very first thing I said, I will, we'll release the hostages, and the number one thing we want in return is foreign journalists coming here.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks anyway, and time for us to go.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu.